Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Lei, and today we're diving into something that completely changed how I think about work, time, and basically everything. Here's a question for you. Have you ever felt like you're working harder than ever, but somehow not getting the results you want? Like you're spinning your wheels, checking off task after task, but at the end of the day you wonder, what did I actually accomplish? Yeah, me too. We've all been there. Now, what if I told you that most of what you do every day, maybe as much as 80% of your effort, is essentially wasted, and that a tiny fraction of your activities, just 20%, produces almost all of your results? Sounds crazy, right? But it's true, and it's called the 80-20 principle. Today, we're breaking down this game-changing concept that's been hiding in plain sight for over a century. By the end of this episode, you're going to look at your business, your time, your relationships, even your money completely differently. And I promise you, this isn't about working harder. It's about working smarter by focusing on what actually matters. So let's jump in. All right, so what exactly is this 80-20 principle? At its core, it's beautifully simple. Roughly 80% of your results come from just 20% of your efforts. Or to put it another way, a small minority of causes produces the majority of effects. This principle was discovered way back in 1897 by an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto. He was studying wealth distribution in Italy and noticed something fascinating. About 80% of the land was owned by just 20% of the population. But here's what really blew his mind. This pattern wasn't just a one-off coincidence. When he looked at other countries, other time periods, he kept seeing the same imbalance pop up again and again. Now, before you think this is just some dusty economic theory, let me show you how wildly universal this principle actually is. Sir Isaac Pitman discovered that just 700 common words, that's less than 1% of all English words, make up about 80% of what we say every single day. Think about that. When you're having conversations, sending texts, writing emails, you're recycling the same tiny set of words over and over. In business, typically 20% of products generate 80% of revenue, and 20% of customers account for 80% of profits. That means if you have 100 customers, about 20 of them are basically paying your bills. Here's a wild one. Studies show that 20% of criminals commit 80% of crimes. And when it comes to movies, get this, just 1.3% of films earn 80% of all box office revenues. That's basically an 80-to-1 rule. And what about your closet? Be honest with yourself. You probably wear 20% of your clothes 80% of the time. Those favorite jeans, that go-to shirt, while the rest just hangs there collecting dust. Even the book you're reading right now, 80% of the value is probably concentrated in just 20% of the content. The rest is filler, examples, or repetition. Now here's what's important. The exact numbers aren't always 80-20. Sometimes it's 70-30, sometimes it's 90-10, sometimes it's even more extreme, like 95-5. The specific ratio isn't the point. The point is this: things in life are not distributed evenly. And once you see this imbalance, you can't unsee it. More importantly, you can start to leverage it. Most of us walk around with the 50-50 fallacy. We naturally expect that if we put in 50% of the effort, we should get 50% of the results. That causes and effects should be balanced and proportional, but that's not how the world works. And understanding this, really internalizing it, changes everything. Because if 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts, what does that mean? It means you're probably wasting 80% of your time on stuff that barely moves the needle. So the question becomes, what if you could identify that crucial 20%? What if you could double down on what actually works and cut out the rest? That's the power of 80-20 thinking. Okay, so how do you actually start thinking this way? How do you develop an 80-20 mindset? First, you need to be reflective. Before you dive into action, before you start checking things off your to-do list, pause and ask, where are my greatest returns actually coming from? Most people skip this step. They just start doing stuff because it feels productive. But doing stuff isn't the same as getting results. Second, be unconventional. Challenge the conventional wisdom. Question the way things have always been done, because conventional thinking is often what creates all the waste and inefficiency that the 80-20 principle reveals. Third, and this one might surprise you, be hedonistic. Now, I don't mean be lazy or self-indulgent. What I mean is, focus on what brings you genuine joy and fulfillment. Because here's the thing, the activities where you find your highest returns are often the ones you naturally enjoy. When you love what you do it better, and you do it with less effort. Be strategic. Don't try to be good at everything. Instead, concentrate on the few objectives where you have a real comparative advantage. What are you naturally great at that others struggle with? And finally, be non-linear in your thinking. Recognize that causes and effects aren't always proportional. Sometimes a tiny action in exactly the right place can create massive impact. And sometimes Herculean effort in the wrong place produces almost nothing. Now let's talk about how this plays out in business, because this is where the 80-20 principle becomes incredibly powerful. Traditional business thinking assumes all customers, all products, and all activities contribute roughly equally to the bottom line. The 80-20 principle shows us that's almost never true. When businesses actually analyze their numbers through this lens, they discover some shocking patterns. Let me give you a real example. There was a company called Electronic Instruments Incorporated. They did a deep dive into their product profitability, and here's what they found. Product groups A, B, and C accounted for just 20% of sales but generated 53% of profits. Meanwhile, product groups G and H were actually losing money, actively reducing their profitability. Think about that. They had products that were draining resources and destroying value, but because they were looking at revenue instead of profit, they didn't realize it. When they looked at customers, the pattern was even more extreme. Customer type A, just 15% of sales, generated 59% of profits. But customer type D, which represented 39% of sales, was actually reducing profits by 18%. These customers were costing more to service than they were bringing in. Armed with this knowledge, what can you do? Everything changes. You can reallocate resources, pour fuel on the fire of your most profitable products and customers. And for the unprofitable ones, either fix them, raise prices, cut costs, or eliminate them entirely. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. When they combined products and customers into what they called competitive segments, parts of the business with different competitive dynamics, they found that their top 6 segments, which represented just 26% of sales, generated 83% of profits. On the flip side, segments 13 through 15, representing 17% of sales, produced losses equal to 31% of total profits. They were basically working hard to lose money. This kind of analysis gives you crystal clear direction. Focus resources on the winners, maintain the middle, and either radically fix or exit the losers. Here's the broader lesson. Complexity is often the enemy of profitability. As businesses grow, they tend to add more products, more customer types, more processes. All that complexity drives up costs dramatically. There's research on middle-sized German companies that found the winners sold a narrower range of products to fewer customers and had fewer suppliers. Simplicity allowed them to excel at what mattered most. Corning's ceramics business is a perfect example. When they hit tough times, they analyzed their product line and discovered that half their products generated just 3.7% of revenue, while consuming a disproportionate amount of engineering resources. By eliminating these products, they cut engineering capacity by 25% and returned to profitability. There's actually a cousin of the 80-20 principle called the 50-50 principle. 50% of a company's customers, products, and suppliers often add less than 5% to revenues and profits. Less than 5%. Imagine cutting half your complexity and losing almost nothing in return. That's the power of this thinking. The same principle applies to inventory. Analysis typically shows that 20% of products account for 80% of volume. So why are you stocking the other 80%? Filofax learned this the hard way. They'd expanded their product line like crazy, binders in exotic skins, specialized inserts for every niche hobby you can imagine. Most of it just sat in warehouses, creating inventory costs, administrative nightmares, and retailer confusion. When they cut the product line to focus on bestsellers, boom, back to profitability. Even in project management, the 80-20 principle applies. Simplify your objectives. Focus on the 20% of features that deliver 80% of the value. When you're pressed for time, you naturally do this anyway. You focus on what matters, so why not do it intentionally from the start? Now, let's bring this home, because the 80-20 principle isn't just for businesses. It's maybe even more powerful when applied to your personal life. Let's start with the big one, time. Most people think they need better time management. They buy planners, download productivity apps, try to squeeze more tasks into every hour. But the 80-20 principle suggests we're thinking about this completely wrong. Here's the reality. For most people, 80% of achievements come from just 20% of time spent. And 80% of your happiness occurs during 20% of your time. Read that again. You're not short on time. You're actually swimming in it. You're just using it poorly, spending 80% of your time on low-value activities that don't really move your life forward. We don't need time management. We need a time revolution, a fundamental shift in how we think about and allocate our hours. This means dissociating effort from reward. Working hard doesn't automatically lead to results. You can hustle yourself into the ground on low-value tasks and get nowhere. What matters is effectiveness, not busyness. It means giving up guilt. Do things you genuinely enjoy. Look at people who achieve the most in any field. They typically love what they do. Passion and performance are linked. It means freeing yourself from other people's obligations. Stop letting everyone else dictate how you spend your time. Your time is your most precious resource. Guard it fiercely. So here's what you do. Identify your high-value 20%. When are you most productive? When are you happiest? What activities genuinely move your life forward? Then multiply that productive 20%. Double the time you spend on those high-value activities, and ruthlessly eliminate the low-value stuff that fills your calendar but contributes almost nothing to your happiness or success. This isn't about being lazy. It's about being intentional. Now let's talk about achievement and success, because the 80-20 principle offers a roadmap that's completely counter to what society tells us. Society says, be well-rounded, keep your options open, work hard at everything. The 80-20 principle says, specialize narrowly, find a niche where you can absolutely dominate. Choose work you genuinely enjoy, because success requires enthusiasm, and you can't fake that long-term. Develop deep knowledge in your area. Knowledge creates market value and competitive advantage. Here's a big one. Identify your core customers. Who values your services most? Focus on serving them exceptionally well and let everyone else go. Find where minimal effort yields maximum returns. We all have personal lucky streaks where everything seems to click. Identify those patterns and lean into them. Learn from the best in your field. Successful people have figured out how to make 20% of effort yield 80% of results. Study them, model them, and when you're ready, consider entrepreneurship. Become self-employed so you can capture the full value of your work instead of giving most of it away to an employer. Hire talented people and leverage their abilities alongside yours. Outsource everything except your core skills, the things only you can do exceptionally well. And use capital leverage to make your money work for you instead of always trading time for dollars. Now, relationships. This is where the 80-20 principle gets really personal. Roughly 80% of the value in your relationships comes from 20% of your relationships. And even within your closest relationships, 80% of happiness often comes from 20% of the time spent together. What does this mean practically? It means stop spreading yourself thin, trying to maintain dozens of superficial connections. I wrote in a previous article about a friend who tried so hard to be the best friend to everyone that he ultimately couldn't be a good friend to anyone. That's the trap of ignoring the 80-20 principle in relationships. Instead, identify and nurture your few most important relationships. For professional growth, you probably need 6 or 7 key allies, 1 or 2 mentors who are more senior than you, 2 or 3 strong peer relationships, and 1 or 2 people you're mentoring. Build these relationships on mutual enjoyment, respect, shared experience, reciprocity, and trust. Invest deeply in this vital few. For personal happiness, there are 7 daily habits suggested by the 80-20 principle: exercise, mental stimulation, spiritual or artistic stimulation, doing something kind for someone else, taking a pleasure break with a friend, giving yourself a treat, and congratulating yourself on your achievements. Notice what these all have in common. They're simple, they're enjoyable, and when you do them consistently, they produce disproportionate returns in terms of your overall well-being. Finally, let's talk money and investing, because this is where 80-20 thinking can literally make you wealthy. The data shows that 80% of wealth is typically created from 20% of investments. For individual investors, 80% of gains usually come from 20% of their holdings. So what does this mean for your investment strategy? First, be unbalanced. I know this sounds counterintuitive because everyone preaches diversification, but the 80-20 principle suggests you should concentrate on a few investments you truly understand, rather than spreading yourself across 100 things you know nothing about. This is exactly what Peter Lynch did throughout his legendary investing career. He focused on a select number of investments he genuinely understood, and it made him one of the most successful investors of all time. Invest mainly in stocks for long-term growth. They outperform other asset classes over time. Buy and hold for the long haul. Avoid the trap of constant trading. And buy when markets are low, when everyone else is panicking. If you can't beat the market index, just track it with index funds. There's no shame in that. Most professional investors can't beat it either. But if you have genuine expertise in a particular area, lean into that. Build on what you know. All right, let's bring this all together. The 80-20 principle is a revolutionary way to view the world. It challenges everything we've been taught about effort and reward, about fairness and distribution, about working hard and getting results. Here's what it tells us. Most of what we do is low value. Most of our efforts produce mediocre results at best. But a small fraction, that vital 20%, produces almost everything that matters. The beauty is, this principle isn't just descriptive, it's prescriptive. It doesn't just explain the world's imbalances, it shows you how to take advantage of them. In business, it means creating leaner, more profitable organizations by focusing relentlessly on what truly matters. Cut the complexity, double down on your winners, stop wasting resources on the trivial many. In your personal life, it means dramatically increasing your happiness and success while actually working less. Identify your high-value 20% and multiply it. Eliminate the low-value 80% that's dragging you down. The next time you feel overwhelmed, too many tasks, too many choices, too many demands on your time, remember the 80-20 principle. Stop and ask yourself, which 20% of my efforts will lead to 80% of my results? Then focus there, relentlessly, unapologetically, because progress doesn't come from working harder. It comes from working smarter, by concentrating your energy on the vital few things that truly make a difference. If you want to dive deeper into this concept, I've written a detailed article breaking down everything we covered today, with even more examples and applications. Head over to bullishbooks.com and check out the full post. You'll find the link in the description. And if this episode resonated with you, if you're going to look at your work and your life differently because of what we talked about today, do me a favor. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'm Lei, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Now go out there and focus on your 20%.